Well, Van is obviously a great coach.
Got to do it with supreme focus, right? With razor sharp focus. Breathe what he's breathing.
But he's a better person.
Biggest thing you gave me was time. You didn't really know me. We were from the same neighborhood and area, but I was with a group of guys that wanted to go to college, wanted to play ball, and you actually gave us that reality that, hey, this can actually happen, because we saw somebody that was like us and that we wanted to become.
Only thing that matters is you come out here, play after play after play after play, and that's the play we do. That's what matters.
Recruiting is about relationships. It's built on trust. It's built on doing the right things, and it's built on your head coaches and your athletic director, their vision. And I think we have two great leaders, both of those positions. So it makes it easy for me to go out and do what I do.
Be aggressive. Let's win. Here we go.
Once again, we're excited to have another dynamic leader on with us tonight. Rick Dickson is the Interim Athletic Director at the University of Tulsa. This is his second stint with the Hurricane. He was hired as the Athletic Director at TU the first time, very early in his career. Rick, we put this podcast together to share leadership thoughts and ideas with people in sports. And it's kind of been really cool. We've had coaches, head coaches, we've had athletic directors, we've had conference commissioners, we've had former players on with us. And we really appreciate you for coming on. So we'll jump right in. First thing I want to ask you, which has been really cool. First, I know that you're a former defensive back, and it's always good to talk to a former defensive back, but talk to us about your journey from being a college athlete to a former college athlete, and then to an athletic director at 3 major universities. Is that you wanted to do? How'd you head down that path of administration?
Well, I appreciate the lead in, Van, and thanks for having me on. I know our paths have crossed through the years, and I find myself back at a place that you spent a little time too, at my alma mater, the University of Tulsa, where for Brenda and I, it all started here, having been a student athlete, finishing in 77. And then after a few fruitless years in the minor league baseball track, came back to Tulsa and got involved. I was in coaching for 4 years. And then after meeting Brenda and getting married and starting a family of 4 children in 40 months, that led me out of coaching into some other opportunities, and actually got in with another young coach and I that had grown up together. It was in a similar situation. We we had an opportunity to purchase our childhood sporting goods in the town we grew up in, right outside of Tulsa in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and did that for about 4.5 years, and which was a great experience. It turns out that was kind of my training school for what led to be, a 30-year athletic director career. Because I guess it was in the summer of '88, vice president at the University of Tulsa, who I'd known from my time as a student athlete there, called, and we'd kept a relationship and said, look, we've got a number 2 position. Now, you got to slow it down there for a second, because number 2 30 years ago was a lot different than number 2 today.
Right.
In those days, there weren't a lot of people behind the number 2s.
Right.
A little bit of everything. And
Understood.
Got to wear a lot of hats at once, which actually in hindsight was the greatest experience I could have as a young aspiring administrator. And, to your point, Van, for your question of something I aspired to do, it really wasn't. At that time, as those of us out there that know, your main focus is, okay, how to put food on the table for 4 young kids.
Right.
And I knew, even though I'd enjoyed, the whole experiences I had in ownership of a business, learning from scratch what it took, the pressures every day of managing resources, managing people, learning how to market, learning how to promote, learning how to, the importance of customer service, all those things. And that was, a real world opportunity for me to develop all those skills. And when that call came to come back and take over as kind of a position we'd refer to as a deputy today, so from business to the game event management, oversight, you were the only liaison probably with the coaches, and most of the staff at that time was all support staff, trainers, equipment people, and the ticket people and those folks. So it was a great hands-on learning experience. And the interesting thing, and this is something you don't see occur often, so I didn't really know what I was getting into. I knew it was a pathway back to sport, and that was something I was passionate about. My only experience to that point had been as a student athlete and then as a coach. And looking back, it was probably, that was, I think, instrumental because it teaches us the culture. We understand the culture of sport, having competed, having played, understanding, playing myself a couple sports in college and understanding just all the challenges, peaks and valleys and adversities you face. And then the same thing from a different chair in the coaching. So I had a good sense of the culture because I'd grown up in it. What I didn't know was the whole administrative aspect of it. So I went into it that summer of '88 with the idea, well, I'll learn. I'm a quick learner on my feet. That's what we are as DBs, right? You better.
That's right.
and we learn quickly. But
That's right.
So within literally a matter of 6 months, I'd gone from starting into the industry to we had the AD at the time resigned, and I was appointed or elevated to interim athletic director, same as I am today here 34 years later. But but at that time around, I sure didn't know what I was getting into. But I tell especially young people all the time that, when they ask how do we follow that path? Well, first of all, not many paths evolve like it did for me. I mean, I realized I was fortunate from starting in the industry and in a matter of 10 months had become interim athletic director from the very start. And but the one thing that I hearkened back to things that I learned from sport was, first is I knew I had to build a team. And even in our small department at Tulsa at the time, one of the things that struck me was here I was with people that I had from the time, some still of the coaches and staff that were around from my days as a student athlete. Mm-hmm. And in my years for coaching and them having been gone almost 5 years, I came back and it struck me so odd that people that I knew that were in the department didn't know each other, and particularly amongst the coaching groups. And I said, wait a minute, this can't be right. So the very first thing I did was pulled everyone together and said, look, this is going to be a little bit of a learning curve for you and me. But what we're going to do is we're going to do it together, and we're going to do it as a team and a family. And so starting today, we're going to have departmental meetings every month. We're going to have head coaches meetings every 2 weeks. And so we're going to learn this together. And, of course, at 32, I'd look around the room, and in a lot of instances, I was the youngest dude in the room. And but going back to the sport piece of it, so that was my starting point. The skill sets I had, as I said, was knowing the culture. I was a product of it. The second part was what I did learn in owning and running my own business, even though it's just a short time, a little less than 5 years, was so many of those skills I developed it turned out that they were transferable. If you think about how important managing, resources, managing people, learning how to buy and sell, learning customer service, learning how to market and promote. Well, we all know that's pretty prominent in the industry of intercollegiate athletics. So not the traditional path, but I think a good example of how you can take advantage of skills you develop in a lot of arenas and cobble those together towards things that work in many arenas. So that was one of the things I learned.
Okay. So you entered this realm, or you entered the field of administration really early in your life.
Yeah.
And now you have been, how do I say it? you've been seasoned, right?
That term.
So what would you tell the younger Rick Dickson that you know now?
That's a great question, Van. You know, it's interesting. I don't know that I would do things much differently. Here's the things I think that were developed and honed through my years through athletics at the student athlete level and even the coaching was the importance of one, being goal oriented, two, surrounding yourself with a team, three, getting that team to connect and unite and operate as a team, and that's goes to the leadership piece of it. You know, is I think for those of who've been in athletics, that's something that we, if it doesn't come to us naturally, it certainly comes to us through habit and development, right? That's part of it. And for those that enter into it and aren't by nature necessarily good teammates, if you're part of a team and it's a team that aspires to be successful, you're going to become a good teammate. And so that really, though, it's kind of those cornerstones that I, not having had the specific development in that industry, I really relied back on those traits,
Right,
and values that have been developed in the athletic arena. And as I look back on it now, that's 1988, so we're talking about 32 years ago. You know, I wouldn't trade anything there. The learning curve piece is, you know, that I think, again, I hearken back to athletics and how valuable that was because it emphasized to me, you know, first of all, I wasn't afraid to fail.
yeah.
Especially as an old DB. Well, we know that happened a few times.
That's a part of it.
But you know what? I was ready to line up and go again. And so I used the term fearless and relentless. Those were the two real traits that I valued the most and kind of said, look, I'll learn the skill set. I was confident I could do that, but I'm going to do it, you know, without fear, and I'm going to do it relentlessly. Nobody's going to outwork, outthink, and out-strategize what needs to be done than me. And so I went into it with that mindset, and it really gave me, you know, that kind of second wind of, okay, you're not going to learn it all overnight, and don't be afraid to, you know, ask questions, ask for help, ask for opinions, those things. But at the same time, know that if I've built a good team around me and got them to perform and connect with each other as a team, that would be, you know, the first important step. And I still believe that today.
Right. I think it's so amazing as I listen to you and I hear the words of the leaders that we've had on before. And my dad always said something as I grew up. He would say that if you hear the same things from different people, it must be true. and so you hear things from leaders about teamwork, about locking in on your values,
right?
Continually practicing the things that you believe in, because those will take you in the right way, even in situations where you're not 100% educated, right? Where you don't know, you just follow your heart, you know. And I always talk to my players about leading with love. You know, there'll be some things that we'll do that you might not agree with. There'll be some things that will happen that might not be as fun as you would like. But at the end of the day, we're all pushing in the same direction. So just trust me along the way. Speaking of that, let's jump to present day. 2020, of course, has been a phenomenal year in so many ways. But you've had to deal with, as a leader, you've had to deal with different types of adversity over the years. When you were at Tulane, you had to deal with Hurricane Katrina. And now in 2020, as a leader, you are dealing with the COVID pandemic, dealing with the social issues that we're facing in our nation. How do you feel those issues have made you stronger or made you better as a leader?
You know, it really since I got to Tulsa, which was I think the third week of September, and certainly not something that planned. It kind of happened out of happenstance. Because since I retired in 2016, I've been consulting on my own, primarily helping, what I call my kids, my proteges that are out there. There's like 13 of them that are ADs around the country. And I think if the real truth be known, I think after about 6 months of retirement, I think my wife Brenda sent out an SOS and said, "Hey, give this dude a call. He got to get him out of my hair." And
Anybody.
so that's kind of how that evolved. Was one, then a second, then a third, and little by little, I found myself helping a lot of those folks, and which I enjoyed. It was fun to kind of be that, little push and lift beneath people. I've always enjoyed that, and like coaching, right?
Right.
Seeing others benefit and evolve and develop, and that coaching instinct. And so I was enjoying that, and actually, interestingly, had just finished doing about a 2-month consulting gig here at Tulsa, where I was helping the previous athletic director, Derek Gregg. And then he's the one that kind of triggered this ball of Tulsa reaching out to me once he had stepped down and moved on to the NCAA. And initially my thoughts were, well, maybe I can just help them by consulting if they had elevate somebody, and they just didn't feel comfortable that was the right direction to go. So they ended up asking me if I'd come back for a period of time to help them get through this. And back to your point, there certainly all those other experiences and adversities. I don't think anything will ever approach what we faced and endured and eventually overcame through the Katrina, because in truth, that was a decade-long really aspiration in terms of surviving the worst natural disaster in history and then rebuilding from the ground up. It finally came to fruition in 2016 when we brought back all of our programs after we'd have to suspend over 9 of our sports for a 4-year period, and then slowly bring them back. And then we're able to do about a $200 million capital campaign and build new facilities, and then got them into the American Athletic Conference. And I thought from my viewpoint that was the perfect time to say, look, I've been to the depths and back, and now leaving them in a good station. And that's really in whatever role we're in, right? In our coaching and leadership, administration, whatever it may be, is if you can look back and say, I've left that place in a better place than when I found it.
Exactly.
Then you can feel good about, what you've contributed. And that's kind of how I felt. But those experiences, without question, first thing I said day one, help and assist and lead, a department and organization through the worst of times. So as long as you'll lock arms with me, we can do this. And that's really been kind of the basis and the message that I've continuously put out there, saying, look, we're not worried about next week and next year, but let's all pull together and really focus hard on today.
Right. Let's keep putting one foot in front of the other, and we'll be okay. So you have done a great job over the years of assisting, I'll say, younger ADs. Who has been some of the best leaders that you've been around, and what kinds of things have you learned from those great leaders that you've been around?
Man, and you may have experienced similar things in coaching. I know, again, when I showed up at a young age, at 32, because I really had been away from the industry, and all of a sudden I pop up on the scene. And I can remember the first year of going to some Division 1A ADs meetings out in Tucson, Arizona, October meetings, and everybody's out there for a long weekend. And it was kind of funny. It was held at a golf resort, and that first day was, of course, a scramble and a luncheon, and then you go into your meetings. Well, most of the day, the ADs, which are seasoned guys like me now, would look at me and either hand me their golf bag or ask me where directions for something like I was there, just somebody working at the club. And so that was the starting point. But to go from there, to this point, I tell you some of the, I'll never forget, having the first sit down with Frank Broyles, for example, and having played against his coach teams when my Tulsa days against Arkansas. And so he used to refer to me as the Tulsa Flash. And then guys like Doug Dickey, who was at Tennessee then, and Pete Dallas at UCLA that you'd encounter. And I was always a people type person anyway, and would, not hesitate to reach out, introduce myself, and after they scratch their head and figure out I wasn't the golf attendant or something.
Yeah.
They kind of, I don't know if they just got a kick out of it, but they were pretty gracious, with their time and advice and support, all those things. And I think of a guy even today who I consider a great friend, Ted Leland, who really led Stanford to become the Stanford that we know today, kind of become the premier model of having across the board excellence in all of the programs. Guys like that, and even one of the first women out there like Barbara Hedges, when I went to AP, left Tulsa, become AD at Washington State, and encountering Barbara Hedges, who was the only female AD in the history of the Pac-10 at that time, and just had a lot of respect for someone like that. And then having the opportunity to help start someone like Judy McLeod, the only FBS conference commissioner in the country, who was an intern for me at Tulsa in GA, and then later became my right arm, and Diane Hickman, who just retired this year, who became vice president of membership services with the NCAA. I joked today that was my team. I had two associate ADs, Diane Dickman, who was over academics, compliance, most of our internal operations, and Judy McLeod, who was over the finance, the ticket office, game day operations, and they were both GAs. So I gave them titles, associate AD/GA. So, but I felt like, hey,
GAs get that.
You can't ride much better than that.
Yeah, well, that's cool. You spoke about helping younger coaches, ADs, and it's been cool in my career to be able to have that opportunity. And I always encourage younger coaches to listen. The coaches will always give. Now I know athletic directors will as well. They'll always give of their time. Just call them, just ask them. That's why we're in this profession, is because we love doing this. We love teaching. We love passing on the information. So it's really cool to hear your experiences as someone who was a protege, and then also talking about the people you've had the opportunity to take under your wing. So let's talk about hiring these staff members. So when you're hiring a new coach or a staff member, how do you look to identify who will be the best addition to your team? And how do you know that this person is the right fit?
Ben, that's a complex but interesting question. And, some things about it are consistent and some things about it vary. The consistent part for me always was, look, I've got to make sure I surround myself with good people. And so I wanted to know who this person was. And I always kind of prided myself in that I can read people and get a sense of who they are as people, and what they're about, what their values are, what do they stand for. All these years I joked about it, and I had to correct it. It just goes to show you, even at older age, you learn things. Is all these years, because of my Native American descent, I always referred to it as my Cherokee Constitution. When I got back to Tulsa this year, I called an older sister who still lives in the state and said, hey, they want to honor, they're going to do a Native American Day at our game this fall. And I said, I'm right, aren't I, that we're Cherokee? And laughed and said, no, we're Choctaw. So even after all these years, I've been promoting this Cherokee Constitution thing,
Right.
value system, and all these years I was wrong. It was my Choctaw Constitution, but to the point or question you asked was, so I look for people that I feel like they have a constitution, and so whatever that value set is, I'm gonna probe and peer and poke until I find out what I think that is, because that's, to me, that's the part that had to match. A lot of people, myself included, can develop the skill sets, but the character piece, the value piece, is embedded. And to me, that's regardless of people's skill set. If the values piece doesn't match up, more times than not, I wouldn't go that direction, because I just felt, regardless of outcomes, if we're not doing this together, we don't believe in the same thing, I don't like where we're going. And so that was always kind of the litmus test that I applied. Now, I loved having, not only good people, but smart people, inquisitive people that weren't afraid, to ask, to probe, to challenge you. I loved the diversity part of it. I wanted smart people and good people around me. But from my viewpoint, any and all packages that would come in, whether it was in gender, whether it was in ethnicity, whether it was in age, whatever it may be, me, the more diverse, the better, and I think even before I moved to Louisiana, I must have been a fan of gumbo, because the more diversity, the more, ingredients that went into something, the better the taste and the better the outcome. And that was always, always my outlook. I actually remember being my first major hire it was probably in my second year, when I had to hire a basketball coach. And I remember going to Indianapolis, the '91 Final Four, and meeting with, it was my first time to make a major hire. And I learned quickly, well, the wrong place to stay was in the coach's headquarters, because you're like a deer in headlights. Everybody's coming at you.
Right.
After moving hotel rooms about 3 times, I was looking at my list. Oh, I've talked to these 6 people, and I had A list, B list, the whole thing, and just happened to flip on the TV, and I think at that time Converse was sponsoring a clinic, kind of an instructional clinic at the Final Four. And I remember looking up, and I recognized Nolan Richardson because he'd been at Tulsa, and I think they had Coach Boeheim on, and then subbing for Coach Pitino was a young guy, and all of a sudden, they were out on the floor and demonstrating skills, and got to see him communicate and teach. I just was kind of fascinated by this guy, and I started looking at my list, and down there on the B list, I said, oh, okay, it's that guy. Okay, let me look at. So lo and behold, I go back over to the coach's headquarters and run into Coach Pitino and said, hey, I understand that associate head coach. I'd like to meet him, Tubby Smith. And he said, sure. He's up. The coaches are up in a suite on 5th floor, going up, and knock on the door. Well, I open the door, or knock on the door, and a young guy, young like me, or even maybe a little younger at the time, answers the door. And I said, I was looking for Coach Smith. Oh, yeah, come on in. He's in here. Well, I walk in the room, and there was Herb Sindick, who later became, a very successful head coach at 3 or 4 schools, and Ralph Willard, another successful head coach, and then the third guy, Tubby Smith. And so we sit down and talk, and I said, hey, who's the young guy that answered the door? He said, oh, that's our GA, Billy Donovan. But I knew, it was interesting. Tubby had never been a head coach. And if I recall right, he was about 40, 41 years old. But after 2 or 3 hours of conversation, we met again for breakfast the next morning. I said, guy, this is the guy I want to bring back to campus right here. And I knew, going back to our discussion of, well, this is somebody that absolutely is made of the right stuff, about the right things, and he's absolutely, the whole specter of what we need, and he brings the right, the right value system to us. I remember thinking to myself, God, he's absolutely perfect. I hope to hell he can coach.
Right.
In 2 years, he had us in the Sweet 16 for the first time in our history. So,
Right.
But that's, just an example.
I again, when I hear the same things over and over again, here at Kansas State, working with Coach Kleiman and Gene Taylor, who is our athletic director, it's been a great experience for me to operate as the assistant head coach. And, I get an opportunity to be right alongside Coach Kleiman, and you get to see what the leader, when you're an assistant coach, all you know about is your position, and you want what's best for your position, but you never have the vision of the entire team. So for me to be able to be in that position to see things from Coach Kleiman's seat, been a great experience. But what you said earlier is you need to make sure you have people in the different rooms, or I like to say on the bus, people on the bus that have the same values as your program. They don't necessarily have to be the same people, but they have to have the same values. There are some coaches who are loud and who are they're boisterous, and there's some coaches that never say a word, but they all have to align with the value system of the program. Well, Rick, I appreciate your time, and
Pleasure.
It was great to listen, but it kind of reinforces some of the things that I continue to hear from different leaders. Of course, I want to be a head coach one day. So all of this information is actually flooding, like my son used to say growing up in school, it's flooding my brain cave. But I'm storing it because, like I said, if you continue to hear the same things from different people, it must be true. So again, I thank you for being on, and I look forward to definitely watching how the program progresses at the University of Tulsa. Once a sports person, always a sports person. It's really hard to retire. So who knows, right? 5 years from now, you might be sitting in that same chair, right? And your wife will be giving you the thumbs up. Yeah.
Be on the Zoom.
So I appreciate you, Rick.